Now listen closely, because this is where everything changes. The kind of man who embodies what Sartre lived and taught isn't playing a game. He's not reading dating advice forums or memorizing pickup lines. He's not feigning indifference to appear aloof. No, he's forged in solitude, sharpened by struggle, and refined through self-awareness. He's not trying to be rare. He is rare because he's done the work that most avoid. He's looked in the mirror, stripped away the layers of who the world told him to be, and stood face with the raw truth of his own existence. You see, when a man truly doesn't need a woman to feel worthy, something extraordinary happens. He begins to radiate a quiet confidence that can't be manufactured, not arrogance, confidence, the kind rooted in purpose, discipline, and self-respect. And I'll tell you something vital, that kind of man is magnetic. Not because he chases attention, but because he walks with intention. Women, and people in general, are not attracted to the desperate. They're drawn to those who are full, not empty. And when you are full of life, full of vision, full of fire for something greater than approval, you naturally draw others in. Just like Sartre didn't orbit around Simone de Beauvoir, but instead carved his own path and invited her to walk alongside him, a man who does the inner work doesn't beg to be chosen. He chooses himself first. That's the paradox of it all, isn't it? The more you try to grasp, the more you repel, but the more you surrender the need to be wanted and focus instead on becoming a man worth knowing, worth respecting, worth admiring, the more you invite genuine connection. This isn't about manipulation. This is about liberation. The path is not easy. You'll be tempted to fall back into old habits, to seek comfort in attention, to base your worth on whether or not someone texts you back. But that's not your mission. Your mission is to build a fortress within your mind, to develop habits that elevate you, a vision that inspires you, and a backbone that holds you upright when life tries to knock you down. People talk about attraction like it's some mystery, but Sartre's life showed us a simple truth. The most attractive man is the one who walks alone, not out of bitterness but out of clarity, the one who can say, I am whole with or without you. Because in that moment, he becomes someone others want to be with, not out of obligation, but out of admiration. And so I challenge you, stop waiting to be validated, stop waiting to be needed. Do the hard work of becoming someone who doesn't flinch when alone. Build your mind, sharpen your focus, and live a life that speaks louder than your words ever could. When you stop needing the world starts to notice you, because the rarest man in the room is always the one who doesn't need to be. There's a law, old as time itself, that governs desire. Scarcity creates value. And I don't mean that in the shallow sense of playing hard to get or acting mysterious to gain attention. I'm talking about something much deeper, more elemental. I'm talking about becoming the kind of man who is genuinely rare in today's world. The man who doesn't chase approval, who doesn't need permission to be great, and who walks into a room not seeking validation, but bringing presence. Let me tell you why that matters. In a world that rewards sameness, the rare man becomes a beacon. While others are bending, twisting, reshaping themselves to fit into molds, he stands tall, unchanged by the winds of opinion. That rarity, it's electric, it turns heads, not because he tries to, but because he doesn't try at all. You see, when something is rare, it automatically commands attention. Think about the rarest elements on Earth. Gold, diamonds, why do they hold value? It's not just their beauty, it's their scarcity. Now, imagine that applied not to material things, but to character, to presence, to a man. A man who doesn't flood your inbox, who doesn't constantly try to prove his worth, who isn't available to everyone at every moment. His time has weight. His words carry gravity, and that gravity pulls. That's the rare man effect, and it's real, but understand this, it's not about creating an illusion of scarcity. It's about becoming someone whose energy is too valuable to waste, someone who doesn't spread himself thin trying to please everyone. He's selective with his time, careful with his commitments, and focused on a purpose larger than himself. That's what makes him rare, and that rarity isn't lonely. It's empowering. It says to the world, I am not for everyone, and I don't need to be. And just like that, the rules change. Because when you no longer chase, when you no longer need, when you no longer beg for crumbs, you elevate yourself to the level where others offer you the feast. Think of the men you admire, the ones who move through life with an unshakable calm. They don't try to impress, they impress by being. They've mastered their craft not to be seen, but because they respect themselves too much to remain mediocre. And in doing so, they attract not just romantic interest, but opportunities, loyalty, admiration. So I ask you, are you willing to become that kind of man? Not the man who's available to all, but the one who is pursued by those who recognize his worth. Because that is the essence of power, not dominance, but discipline. Not control, but clarity. And here's the truth. When you carry yourself like someone of value, others will either rise to meet you or fall away. Let them. You're not here to be liked by everyone. You're here to walk your path with such conviction that others feel honored just to walk beside you. The rare man is not rare because he says he is. He's rare because he lives differently. He thinks differently, and he dares to stand alone, knowing full well that standing alone is what makes him unforgettable. Let's dig into something that most men never truly grasp, and yet it holds the key to the kind of power that doesn't shout, doesn't chase, and doesn't beg to be noticed. I'm talking about emotional independence, the quiet force that turns a man from common to compelling, from tolerated to unforgettable. See, we've been fed this idea that to be attractive, to be desirable, a man needs to prove his affection, lay his heart bare, and make someone else the center of his universe. But let me tell you something. True magnetism doesn't come from dependency. It comes from a deep, unwavering connection to yourself. It's not about needing less from others. It's about needing more from yourself. Think about the people you're drawn to in life, not just in love, but in business, leadership, friendships. What do they have in common? It's not their appearance, their possessions, or even their words. It's how they carry themselves. They walk with ease, they speak with clarity, and above all, they don't lean on others for emotional stability. They generate it from within. That's the magnetism I'm talking about. Now here's the thing most don't understand. When you need someone emotionally, when yourself, worth depends on how someone else responds to you, you give away your power, and people feel that. They might not say it. They might not even consciously realize it, but it shifts the energy. You go from being a source of strength to a seeker of reassurance, and that shift changes everything. But a man who is emotionally independent, he's different. He's centered, he's calm under pressure, grounded in purpose, and resilient when things don't go his way. He doesn't crumble at rejection. He doesn't panic in silence. He doesn't confuse space for loss. He knows who he is, and he holds that frame no matter what. And let me tell you, the moment a man steps into that space of emotional independence, the world starts to respond differently. Suddenly, people lean in. They listen, they wonder what it is about him that feels so solid, so unshakable. That's the power of a man who doesn't need to be needed. He's not emotionally detached. No, he feels deeply, but his emotions don't control him. They don't drive him to beg, to chase, or to lose himself in someone else's presence. That kind of man is rare, and rare things, remember, are always in demand. Now understand, this isn't about pretending to be cool or aloof. This is not about playing games. It's about doing the inner work to build an emotional foundation so strong that your peace is no longer negotiable. That foundation becomes the very thing that attracts others, not out of desperation, but out of admiration. You want to be the kind of man who makes people feel calm when they're near you? Be the calm within yourself. You want to attract deep, meaningful relationships? Be whole enough that you're not looking for completion. You're looking for alignment. And the beautiful part is, when you stop placing your emotional well-being in someone else's hands, you become the kind of man who is impossible to forget. Not because you tried to stand out, but because you stood tall, anchored, centered, and free. Let me take a moment and tell you something most men feel in their bones, but very few ever put into words. Nothing repels desire faster than neediness. I don't say that to shame you. I say that to wake you up. Because if you can understand this one truth, if you can burn it into your mind like a brand, you'll change the way people experience you forever. Now, what is neediness really? It's not love. It's not care. It's not even vulnerability. No, neediness is the silent, desperate cry of a man who has forgotten his own power. It's the energy of grasping, not giving, of craving attention instead of commanding respect. And the moment that need takes the wheel, polarity dies. Polarity, that magnetic force between masculine and feminine, thrives on difference. It's the current between presence and surrender, direction and flow, certainty and emotion. It's what creates spark, but the moment you try to merge too tightly, when you overpursue, overshare, overtext, overanalyze, you blur that edge, and when that edge disappears, so does the attraction. It's not personal, it's physics. Now don't misunderstand me. This isn't about playing cold. It's not about manipulation. This is about standing in your masculine energy not as a performance, but as a principle. Masculinity at its core is about holding space, direction, clarity. It is not reactive. It is not erratic. It does not cling. It leads. When a man is rooted in himself, when he walks his path without checking over his shoulder to see if anyone is following, he becomes magnetic. But when he abandons his mission to orbit someone else, he collapses that energy, he flips polarity, and suddenly, instead of being the grounded force that draws others in, he becomes the emotional weight they want to escape. And we've all felt this. You've been on both sides of it. When someone is clinging to you, expecting you to be their source of joy, their fix, their fuel, what do you feel? Pressure, resistance, a desire to pull away. Not because they're bad, but because their need suffocates the connection. Now imagine being the one who generates that energy without realizing it. That's the tragedy of unchecked neediness. But here's the good news. This isn't permanent. You can change this dynamic starting today, not by pretending to be independent, but by truly becoming it, by building a life so rich with meaning, so full of purpose, that you stop needing someone to make you feel alive. When your joy, your validation, your peace comes from within, you shift, the polarity returns, the dynamic rebalances, and that energy, that presence, starts doing the work for you, because people are drawn to those who are already full. They don't want to be your savior, they want to feel inspired in your presence, and that can only happen when you stop reaching outward and start reaching inward. When you take full responsibility for your emotional state and decide, from this day forward, that you will never again beg to be chosen, and that choice, that shift in energy, will do more for your life, your relationships, and your future than 1,000 clever lines or strategies ever could. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to boast. It doesn't need to chase or prove itself. It simply is, and it radiates from one source, a man living with purpose, a man who's found his mission and is willing to commit his life to it. That, my friend, is the foundation of true magnetism. That is the secret that every woman feels, but few men ever truly understand. When a man is aligned with his purpose, he becomes larger than the moment. He's not pulled by moods, distracted by fleeting desires, or derailed by temporary setbacks. He knows where he's going, and more importantly, why he's going there. That certainty, that unwavering focus, is deeply attractive. Not because he's trying to be, but because purpose has a gravitational pull. You see, when you're living on purpose, your energy changes. You become less reactive, more composed. Less interested in seeking approval, and more interested in staying aligned with your mission. You don't waste time chasing people who aren't meant for your path, because you're too busy walking it. And that's when something remarkable happens. People start to chase you, not because you're trying to be aloof, not because you're playing hard to get, but because purpose is rare, clarity is rare, and in a world of indecision and distraction, the man who lives intentionally becomes a lighthouse in the fog. People feel safe around that energy. They feel inspired by it. They want to be near it, not because he needs them, but because he awakens something within them. Now let me be clear, this isn't about career. It's not about being rich or famous or checking boxes. It's about alignment. It's about waking up each day with direction, a reason to rise, a reason to fight, a reason to grow. That's what gives a man depth. That's what gives his presence weight. Sartre didn't live to impress. He lived to express. He lived to question, to challenge, to write, to create, to leave an imprint on the world. That fire, that purpose, was what made him irresistible, even in the most unconventional of relationships. People weren't drawn to his perfection. They were drawn to his conviction. And conviction, my friend, is the ultimate seduction. Because it says, I know who I am and I'm not afraid to walk alone. That kind of strength doesn't need to convince anyone of its worth. It simply moves forward, and those who recognize its value naturally follow. So if you've been wondering how to be more attractive, more impactful, more unforgettable, it starts by living for something greater than being liked. It starts by asking yourself, what am I here to do? And then doing it with such fire that the world has no choice but to take notice. Because at the end of the day, the man who lives on purpose doesn't need to seduce with words. His life is the seduction. Now let's bring this down from the clouds and into your hands, because it's one thing to talk about rare men and purpose and presence, but here's the truth. Becoming that man, becoming rare, doesn't just happen. It's not an accident, and it's not something you can fake for long. It's built from the inside out, brick by brick, choice by choice, and it all starts with the inner work. See, the modern world makes it easy to avoid yourself. Endless distractions, endless noise, endless chances to escape the discomfort of looking within. But let me tell you something most men never hear. Your greatness is buried under everything you've been avoiding. Your strength, your clarity, your magnetism. It's all there. But it's hidden beneath the need for approval, the fear of rejection, the addiction to comfort. That's the work. The hard, honest, solitary work of facing those shadows and refusing to let them define you anymore. Rare men aren't born. They're forged in discipline, forged in self-respect, forged in hours of saying no to what's easy so they can say yes to what matters. They go into the silence. They examine their patterns. They heal the boy so the man can rise. That's not glamorous. It's not fun. But it's what separates those who stay invisible from those who light up a room without saying a word. And don't misunderstand me. This isn't about perfection. It's about direction. You don't need to have all the answers to be powerful. You just need to stop running from the questions. Who are you when no one's watching? What do you tolerate that drains your soul? What do you believe you deserve? And how is that belief shaping your reality? Because that belief, that's everything. A rare man doesn't beg to be chosen because he already chose himself. He did the work to believe, truly believe, that he is worthy. Not in a loud, boastful way, but in a quiet, unwavering one. He's not rattled when someone pulls away. He's not broken when things don't go his way, because he knows what he's building. He trusts the path, and more than that, he trusts himself. And in a world full of people who are constantly looking outside for answers, a man who trusts himself becomes magnetic. He's not trying to get energy from others. He gives it. He brings peace into chaos. He brings direction into confusion, He brings presence into a world starving for it. That's rare, that's unforgettable, but you don't become that man by accident. You become him by confronting the parts of yourself that most people ignore. You become him by deciding right here and right now that your story will not be written by fear, by need, or by compromise. You write it in bold, clean lines. You write it by your standards, and you hold yourself to those standards, even when it's hard, even when no one's looking. That's the inner work, and that's the difference between a man who waits for life to change and the one who changes himself. The man who becomes rare doesn't seek a throne. He builds one within, and once he does, the world starts to rise to meet him. And so, here we are, at the edge of everything we've uncovered together, the truth Sartre pointed toward, the wisdom the world rarely says aloud, and the fire that burns in every man bold enough to rise above the ordinary. You've seen it now, haven't you, that the rarest, most magnetic men are not the loudest, not the flashiest, not the most agreeable. They're the ones who don't need. They don't chase validation, and they don't bend their essence to fit into someone else's mold. They are calm, clear, unwavering, not because life made it easy, but because they made the decision to master themselves. They understand that freedom, not control, is the source of real power, that emotional independence isn't detachment, but strength, that neediness suffocates attraction, while purpose breathes it into life. They see that to live for someone else's approval is to quietly abandon your own soul, and that to live with direction, discipline, and clarity is to become unforgettable without ever having to try. And in the end, it all comes down to this: the world is not waiting for more men to blend in. It is waiting for you to become rare, not by changing who you are, but by peeling away everything you were never meant to carry in the first place. The fear, the doubt, the noise, beneath it all is the man the world has been waiting for, the man you have been waiting for. So don't ask who will love you if you rise. Ask who will still matter when you do. Now go and live like you were born to leave a mark.